Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff Waldman, the host of the podcast, also founder of ScaleHR. And this podcast is about all things HR, talent, HR tech, the world of work, and then everything that could be connected to that. So these podcast episodes live on our website at goscalehr.com. Also on our YouTube channel. So if you're a big, video watcher like me, you can go on there, smash the like button, add comments, and also hit the little bell so that you get notified when there's new episode, about drop. So, it's a great way to stay up to date on just all of our episodes that are dropped every Thursday morning, once a week. And so today's topic, and I'll bring in our guest shortly, it's pretty interesting actually. So as a former HR leader, it's something that we were tasked with and always thought about. So it's called the Generalist advantage. So really, it's really about the idea of employing people who are generalists versus specialists, and so that's the crux of it all. But we'll dive into it, break it all down with Julie Lavergne, who's going to be joining us shortly. But for now, I just want to share just a couple of points first, as I always do. And so typically when an organization grows, and so I work primarily with small mid-sized companies, and so they're obviously going through periods of growth and change, and the hiring, but not hiring, the cutting. So these things come up a lot. And so normally when companies start to grow, they start to build out business functions. So they start to create units, departments, and silos, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's just the normal course of organizing people. And so what it does is you start to create jobs that are more specialized, because that's what you need. Okay, and it could be a certain skill set area. So jobs start to get a little bit narrow in scope, and they go deeper into their specialty or expertise. Versus when a smaller organization, jobs tend to be broader in scope, and you have greater impact, and you're sort of a master of all trades and all different types of skills. And I think the reason why companies do this is many reasons. Obviously efficiency, expertise. So then you can actually say that you've got the expertise in a certain area. Complexity of operation. More people are involved. More cooks in the kitchen. It starts to get a little bit more complicated. Scalability, career progression, and then obviously innovation. So the idea behind that is obviously when you have people that are experts in a certain domain or field, the innovation starts to improve theoretically. So obviously in the last 2 to 4 years, we've seen a massive shift in our global business community. Disruption has been a constant major change, and it's largely due to our technology. It has just blown up, and changing work structure, flexible work, remote work, virtual work, hybrid work, you name it, it's all there. The changing demographic makeup of our organizations, Gen Ys are now a larger group than baby boomers, and then of course there's Gen Zs, or if you're in the US, Gen Zs. And so that dynamic of the changing workplace is definitely there. And then, companies need to be able to change quickly and adapt, pivot, all of these things. And it doesn't matter how big you are. I mean, I'm a small business. Julie's company is a small business, but you still have to change and adapt. And so there's a lot to talk about here about generalist, specialist, org structure, work, all of these types of things. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to bring in Julie Lavergne, who's based in Ottawa, our nation's capital, and I just want to thank you for being here. So I just did a 5-minute spiel about God knows what. So talking about generalist, expertise, specialist, all these things. Before we dive into all of it, maybe you can give us a bit of an idea of your work and what you do.
You know, that's the hardest question to ask a generalist, because it's like, do you have 15 minutes to hear the whole story of what I do? Or it's like, who do I present today? Because the interests are so vast. But trying to give the Coles Notes for today is leaders come to me with a puzzle that they're struggling to solve. And so I co-create a customized solution. So whether that is facilitating an HR strategy, whether that's building a specific program, or designing a workshop that gets to like the team dynamics and kind of helping coach through that. So those are kind of the work that I do.
Fantastic. So I guess maybe we can just sort of dive into it. I mean, what is your definition of what it means to be a generalist in workforce today, and then why do you believe it's a valuable skill set and mindset?
So obviously the broad definition is that like a general has broad skills and experience across a variety of domains, but it's not just that. There's more and more that you talk to generalists. They have systems thinking, dot connecting, very quick learners. You talked about pivoting. They're master pivoters because they're always kind of put in new situation, new areas, new domains. And so they autodidact, they learn on their own very quickly. And so I think that's the broad sense of a generalist. It's not just lots of experience. I think it's more of that bigger picture thinking and really thinking beyond what's immediate and having that systems thinking view. Why I think it's important? I mean, what organization wouldn't want those type of problem solving systems thinkers? So that's it.
So that's really interesting. I mean, so this topic, I mean, I've had many conversations over the years about it. I mean, obviously, when you're sort of making that decision whether or not to go that generalist route or the specialist route, it's not just easy as saying, black and white, but are there any similarities or differences, between a generalist and a specialist?
Yeah. And you made me think of something too, of maybe to answer your question, going back on why generalists are useful for organizations. You talked about like specialists create silos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just natural, and you almost want them to, right? You want them to dig deep, to have this deep level expertise. But as you have all these specialists in the organization, then you're creating all these knowledge trenches. So who's the one going across all of these specialists, kind of like weaving a story or connecting all of them to really problem solve that solution that you need? At the end of the day, you need all of their input, but you need somebody that kind of jives them together, because you need all that multi-stakeholder input into your solution. And so I think that's the generalist skill that comes especially to a project team. And I know that's a bit of the research that's coming out, saying project team with a generalist will move faster, will innovate faster, will create products faster. So the similarities, so great problem solvers, the innovators, they both have those. It's just the context in which they do it. Some are doing it deep into their level, and you need that. And the other ones are more kind of building across all of those specialists, so to speak, and weaving that type of solution together in terms of problem solving. So I think that's like both similarities and differences at the same time.
So some people have, told me that, if you are too broad and you're focusing on too many things, then you don't do anything well. Versus if you focus on, say, one thing and then you do it really, but quite well. And that's sort of the argument, for a lot of small companies, is that if you focus on too much, then you're not really good at doing anything. You're sort of average, doing lots of things. Versus if you specialize on sort of one or two things. So, what do you say to, those people who argue that same argument when it comes to talented people?
What do you need? So when you do need a deep expertise that goes down, that might be what's needed at that time.
Yeah.
Or do you need somebody that is kind of good enough to be dangerous in the area, that's able to move it forward? So you may have your specialty in marketing and they just dive deep into marketing and that's what you need. But sometimes, so my analogy is CEO. So you have a scale up CEO, you have a startup CEO, you have a turnaround CEO. sometimes that's already accepted that you need a CEO at different times of the business. So it's the same thing with, let's say, a function. You may need that deep expertise to go down, but then sometimes you may need more of a connecting, right? Like sometimes it may be too siloed, not working so well at the organizational level, maybe a little bit of friction. So maybe you need somebody that's kind of like, I call it like little spider webs that really kind of connects it into the bigger strategy as the overall organization. So sometimes I see this cyclical wave of sometimes you need going deep, and then sometimes they're too deep that it's on their own, and then sometimes you may need somebody that builds it back up. So that's what I would say is, and generalist, I mean, I'm not going to call myself a coder. I mean, there's still some things I don't do. I don't spread myself too thin. Yeah. It's almost like, you get a certain level and you keep building out from what you know, because you're just so curious about how it all works, how all the parts work. And it just depends which part I'm navigating around.
So can a generalist, become a specialist, and then can a specialist, become a generalist?
Why not?
What do you think?
Why not? I think it's more of a mindset.
Okay.
I think it's where the interest lies and the type of mindset. Sometimes they may just keep going deep and stay there. That's their interest and their mindset, and sometimes even specialists. You've seen that. Sometimes people are specialists. There's doctors, right? Like they were in one professional field their entire life, and then finally just something clicked, and then sorry, I've got fireworks going on behind me.
We've got fireworks going. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Now that's a first.
Yeah.
I love it.
Technology. So then they may become, something completely different, and that's just their interest pivoted.
Okay. So I'm actually, every question, could not, because I disagree with you or anything like that. I actually agree with you. I've always been a generalist myself, right? So, and I've taken that sort of approach because I think, in the world of HR, which is what I've been doing for, the last 25 years, that there's so many areas of HR. And, I think that can be, the same for any part of work, whether it be marketing, finance, whatever it is. Like, there are lots of different things that go into these, areas. And so for me, I always enjoyed the variety of work. So, I was an HR leader. HR leadership, that's sort of a different thinking hat. And then I get into the, nitty gritty of compensation tactics. And then, then I'm talking about or restructuring or whatever it is. So there's a lot of really cool things going on there. But some people like that specialist aspect because because they like to focus on, one thing or just a couple of things. So clearly, like me, I'm an advocate for the generalist, like you are. So why is it the case for you? And then do generalists possess, I don't know, a certain characteristic of a specific mindset, maybe, that put them in a better position than a specialist to do better?
I'll ask you a question. I know you're interviewing me, but did you always know you were a generalist? And then the second question is, when you were working, were you always valued for those generalist skills?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think there was a case for both, but I definitely think from my perspective, having that broader perspective, definitely helped me.
Okay. Yeah.
100%.
So I think the reason I'm an advocate for it is, to your point, a lot of people still don't value generalists. They still feel, as you said, like jack of all trades, master of none. You're shallow. You don't really know enough. The expertise isn't valuable to us. And so when you start talking to a lot of other generalists, there is a value there, but it's just not seen and understood. And too many times I'd have my job description, and generalists are famous to color outside the job description because they need to understand how even if they have a job, they need to understand how the inputs and the outputs and, 2 steps down the line, how does that matter and how the whole flow goes. And then they get in trouble for it, right? They get in trouble. It's like, why are you over there? Stick to your job description. But that's not how it functions. So that's why I think there's an advocate is like understanding that value that they bring of connecting those dots. And it's definitely a much better output if they understand of their work, if they understand how it all connects, right? And how it feeds the bigger organization. So, and I think a lot of people don't know that. So they're just kind of told to stick their job description. Why are you asking these other questions? So I think I want to support them to say, yeah, keep going. We need more of that thinking.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously, the general trend that has been the trend for years, decades, is as companies get bigger, we start to create more specialist type job work. Do you believe that that is still the right path to take? And then if yes, why? And then if no, why?
Yes, I think it's 100% needed. I mean, we are moving to a more and more specialized world, right? Like things are getting more precise, a lot more detailed. We need to understand it. We're developing. But I think it's understanding, like I call it like peppering generalists in the org structure somewhere, right? That ties it in. I don't know what the ratio is. Research, 20-1, right? Maybe or 10-1, and have somebody that kind of that accelerates those specialists into what they do. So that's how I see organizations moving forward. If you think about all the skills, like generalists were appreciated, as you're saying, at the early stages of our organization. Why does that go away, right? It's needed to build it. Why does it never come back in the future as the organization grows? Maybe there's another period of time, I was just saying with the CEO, where it's like, ooh, we're so deep in our expertise. We have so many, maybe we have to hire a few generalists to like bring those teams better together. And sometimes a generalist could be the leader. It doesn't have to be the leader either. Just depends.
Okay. I can understand that. And then, obviously, talking about doing something is one thing, but then actually doing it is a whole, different ballgame. How can organizations change sort of how they approach jobs, and from a generalist to a specialist point of view, and then vice versa? I mean, obviously, it's a mindset shift, and it's a complete overhaul in sort of how people think about structures and work. So, how would you recommend that they do that?
Sorry, in terms of how to hire generalists, you're saying, or
no? So, how can they sort of approach, or how can organizations change how they approach jobs? Shifting from like a specialist role to a generalist role, or vice versa. I mean, obviously, you talked about several things already, but it's a bit of a mindset shift in terms of how things have changed. And so, is there something that you would recommend to organizations?
I guess the way I saw it, I was brought in to build. Again, back to what do they need? And if that organization is going to face a lot of uncertainty, which organizations are, and certain functions are going to kind of be put to the fire a lot more, probably consider having more generalists in that role, because that's what they do best. They don't claim to be experts, but they claim to grab experts' knowledge to try to like grab it in order to turn it into something. So when you look at certain functions that may be faced with a bigger challenge moving forward, I would consider putting in a generalist at that in that group somewhere to help them along. So that's how I would see them thinking about where to put generalists and how to kind of pivot certain roles depending on where they're moving forward. Not all functions will face a lot of change, right? Certain ones are pretty stable. But some, are going to be faced with a lot of turbulence in the future, with problems they've never seen before. So maybe consider it that way.
So obviously the generalist has to be someone that is, really good at working with, different types of people, obviously, because I mean, when you're working with someone who is used to a certain silo or a certain, small little box of a sandbox, it's being able to kind of bring that person out of their sandbox a little bit so that they can actually get things done. And that's often very, very, difficult, to do, especially for smaller companies when they start growing and they're, creating silos, right? And with silos, the first thing that happens is that these silos don't actually work across silos anymore. They're sort of building their own, identity and their processes, and they're getting to actually know each other. It's almost like a subculture, and it's inside of an organization, and so that over time, can be very, very dangerous. So very interesting. So if there's just one thing that our viewers can actually learn from everything that we've talked about today in this episode, what is that one thing?
I think it's kind of checking our own biases of like assessing, what is good. Even myself, I'll get caught up hiring somebody going, well, they have to have this knowledge and experience already in order for me to hire them. Yet I'm being quite, that's not me. I want to be hired for some certain things that maybe I haven't done. So, but when we only look at what people have done before, then it's like driving with a rear view mirror. Right. And so there's a different way of assessing good and potential into the future, and is looking at, if they're able to learn quick across a variety of domains, then they're probably able to handle whatever, and not just learn, had impact. And that's the biggest thing with generalists, right? It's not just learn and I played in all these sandboxes. Is like, look at this big sandcastle I built in this sandbox and this big sandcastle I built in this sandbox, right? That's what you're looking for, saying, well, if you're doing it across all these sandboxes, you're going to be able to handle whatever I throw your way. So I think that's the one thing is let's review how we assess good. And it's not always because you've done it, you're going to be able to do it again in the future. Is maybe there's a different way of looking at that.
And I think that is a fantastic final, parting point. And so, I want to thank you for being here with us. Actually, for our viewers, like the video, add your comments. Obviously want to actually hear from you. If you think we're out in left field, say so. I mean, obviously, always love a good argument, and I'm sure
please bring it on.
Julie does as well. And don't forget, so episodes live on our website, GoScaleHR.com, and on our YouTube channel as well. So like the videos, add comments, smash the subscribe button. So thank you all for tuning in, and Julie, thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. It was awesome.
Audio Jungle.